My name is Evelyn Hawthorne, and at 62, I had just sold the hotel chain I had built from the ground up. Decades of early mornings, late nights, and relentless decisions had led to this moment, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration coursing through me as I adjusted the silk scarf around my neck. Charleston's historic streets glimmered under the soft glow of gas lamps, the air tinged with salt from the nearby harbor. I took a deep breath, savoring the familiar scent of the city I had called home for over 40 years. Tonight was for me. Tonight was for celebration. I slipped into the passenger seat of my car, where Celeste, my daughter, sat with her usual poised elegance. At 38, she carried herself with the confidence I had instilled in her. But there was an intensity in her eyes tonight, a sharpness I couldn't quite place. Her dark hair fell perfectly along her shoulders, and her smile, though warm, hinted at something calculated beneath the surface. Beside her, Marcus, her husband of 3 years, tapped impatiently on his phone, offering polite nods that never quite reached his eyes. The valet greeted us outside the Magnolia Room, one of Charleston's most exclusive restaurants. I could feel the anticipation thrumming in my chest as we stepped inside. The hostess guided us past linen-draped tables and crystal chandeliers, the soft clink of silverware mixing with muted jazz in the background. I caught my reflection in the polished glass, a woman who had fought, scraped, and built something meaningful. Someone who had earned the right to an evening like this. Celeste's hand brushed mine as we approached the table, a silent acknowledgement of our shared triumphs and struggles. I couldn't help but smile as I slid into my seat, the polished mahogany warm beneath my fingertips. Marcus offered a stiff nod and a brief smile, and I noticed a subtle glance exchanged between him and Celeste. I shook off the small pang of unease and focused on the champagne flute in front of me, golden liquid catching the candlelight. "I still can't believe it," Celeste said, her voice soft, but carrying an edge I couldn't ignore. $47 million. All your hard work. She raised her glass toward me, eyes glimmering with what I wanted to believe was pride. I clinked mine against hers, savoring the fizz, the sense of accomplishment, and the rare moment when everything felt right. As the waiter placed the menus before us, I caught a flicker of motion in the corner of my eye, Marcus leaning slightly toward Celeste, speaking in hushed tones. Their laughter was too quiet, too deliberate, and for a brief second, a shiver of caution ran down my spine. I pushed the feeling aside. Tonight was about celebrating, about the life I had fought to create. I lifted my glass once more, inhaling the scent of champagne and the warmth of the candlelight. Charleston stretched out beyond the windows like a promise, and for a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to relax completely. But even in moments of triumph, I had learned to stay alert. The waiter approached with our first course, and Celeste's eyes flicked toward mine with a gleam I couldn't quite read. I smiled politely, taking my seat, ready to enjoy the evening or so I thought. The candlelight danced across the polished silverware as our waiter poured the first flutes of champagne. I lifted mine, letting the bubbles tickle my fingers, and glanced at Celeste. Her smile was bright, almost radiant, yet there was a tension in the curve of her jaw I couldn't ignore. She raised her glass with a delicate flick of her wrist. "To you, Mom," she said, her voice soft but deliberate. "To all your hard work, your vision, and this incredible achievement." I mirrored her gesture, clinking glasses gently. "To all of us," I replied, savoring the sound and the warmth of the liquid sliding down my throat. It was a taste of victory I had earned. $47 million. Decades of sacrifice condensed into one celebratory night. Pride swelled in my chest, and for a moment, The lingering shadows of exhaustion and stress lifted entirely. Marcus raised his glass next, his smile measured and courteous. "Well done, Evelyn," he said, eyes flicking briefly to Celeste before returning to me. There was a subtle stiffness in his posture, a careful calculation in the way he held himself, as though every gesture was measured and rehearsed. I made a note of it, but pushed the thought aside. This was a celebration. Surely, even the most meticulous husband would have a moment to relax. Celeste sipped her champagne and then leaned slightly toward Marcus, whispering something I couldn't catch. Their eyes met briefly. A flash of something I couldn't name: anticipation, anxiety, or perhaps calculation. I cleared my throat and focused on the menu, reminding myself that the evening was meant for joy, not speculation. The waiter returned with our appetizers, a delicate crab bisque garnished with chives, and a plate of seared scallops glistening under the soft light. I took a bite and closed my eyes briefly, letting the flavors settle. Celeste's fork hovered in the air longer than necessary, her movements precise, almost mechanical. I noticed the subtle tension in Marcus's shoulders as he nodded at her suggestion, though his expression remained polite. I smiled, trying to ease the undercurrent I felt. Lifting my glass again. "To new beginnings," I said, letting my voice carry warmth and genuine affection. Celeste's eyes sparkled, and for a fleeting instant, I allowed myself to believe in the pride I thought I saw there. But Marcus's hand tightened slightly around his flute, and he cleared his throat in a way that drew my attention. There was something fragile in the air, a quiet unease beneath the elegance of the restaurant. Charleston's familiar hum outside the windows seemed distant and almost irrelevant compared to the tension gathering at our table. I sipped my champagne again, forcing a smile, determined to maintain the evening's grace. As we talked about the foundation I planned in honor of my late husband, I watched Marcus shift in his seat, his eyes scanning the room ever so briefly. A fleeting glance, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me aware that the evening might not be as simple as celebration. Celeste's tone was light, practiced, yet her eyes betrayed a calculation that left a cold trace along my spine. I leaned back, savoring the moment, while keeping my attention quietly fixed on them. The toast had been made. The celebration was underway. And yet, beneath the clinking of glasses and laughter, something else had begun. I lifted the flute of cranberry juice that the waiter had just placed before me, savoring its sweet aroma. At first glance, it seemed perfectly ordinary, the deep red liquid catching the candlelight. But something about it made me pause. A faint residue clung to the bottom of the glass, almost imperceptible, like a film that hadn't fully dissolved. My heart ticked a fraction faster, a subtle alarm igniting in the back of my mind. Celeste leaned across the table, her fingers lightly brushing mine as she spoke about the foundation I intended to establish in memory of my late husband. Her words were bright, filled with admiration. But I noticed a flicker of something else in her eyes, a tension I couldn't quite name. Marcus nodded along, his smile polite, yet his gaze flicked repeatedly toward me, as if measuring my reactions. I took a small sip, careful, deliberate. The flavor was slightly off sharper, almost metallic, but I told myself it was my imagination. Charleston's air outside carried the scent of the harbor, the city's warmth brushing against the glass windows. But it did little to soothe the sudden prickling in my nerves. I set the glass back on the table, my mind beginning to tick through possibilities. Something wasn't right. The waiter, Antonio, moved past with practiced ease, refilling another table's wine glasses. His presence was familiar. He had served us countless times over the years. Yet tonight, I found myself noticing the way he lingered just a moment too long near our table, his eyes flicking in our direction before he turned away. A whisper of intuition told me to pay attention. I smiled at Celeste, masking my unease. "Everything tastes wonderful," I said, my voice steady. She nodded, her smile unwavering, but her hand lingered over her glass longer than necessary. Marcus's movements were careful, precise, almost mechanical, and I found myself watching him more intently than I had intended. I focused on the residue again, letting my fingers trace the cool glass. A sense of cautious alertness settled over me, a combination of suspicion and curiosity. Something subtle, almost imperceptible, had shifted the balance of the evening. The celebration, so carefully orchestrated, now carried a hidden tension I couldn't ignore. As I lifted my flute to speak, a glimmer of motion caught my eye, the faintest shake of Celeste's hand as she adjusted the napkin. A nervous glance toward Marcus. The quick swallow, as if to steady herself. These small, fleeting details hinted at danger, but the polished smiles and laughter continued to mask it. I sipped again, slower this time, letting the taste linger on my tongue while my mind ran through scenarios. Even as the conversation continued, discussing charity plans and future travels, the unease remained. The restaurant's warmth and music could not dispel it. Somewhere beneath the laughter and clinking of glasses, a hidden threat had begun to take shape, subtle but undeniable. I kept the glass in my hand, feeling the weight of what might happen if I misjudged this moment. I had just set my glass down after inspecting the faint residue at the bottom when I felt a presence at the edge of my awareness. Antonio, our waiter for years, lingered nearby under the guise of adjusting the centerpiece on the next table. His movements were deliberate, almost cautious, and my eyes met his across the soft glow of candlelight. There was something in the way he hesitated, a tension in his shoulders I had never noticed before. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, the words barely above a whisper. I tensed, my fingers tightening around the stem of my glass. I need to tell you something about your drink." My pulse jumped. "Excuse me," I murmured, keeping my voice calm despite the sudden spike of alarm. Antonio glanced around as if checking for anyone eavesdropping, then nodded subtly. "I shouldn't be saying this, but I saw your daughter, with her husband nearby, drop something into your cranberry juice when you were answering your phone." For a moment, the restaurant's polished elegance, the muted jazz, and the soft clinking of silverware all disappeared. My hand froze midair, my throat tightening. The laughter of nearby tables seemed distant, muffled, as if the world had contracted to this single, impossible revelation. "Celeste, my daughter." I blinked, willing the words not to be true. Antonio's eyes were steady, unwavering. "I've been serving here for 20 years, he continued quietly. "I never interfere, but I couldn't let this go unnoticed. You need to be careful." I swallowed, the room tilting slightly as a cold realization swept over me. I had noticed her subtle movements, the nervous glance Marcus had cast, the almost imperceptible hesitation in Celeste's hand, but I had rationalized it all. Now, the truth slammed into me with the weight of decades of trust betrayed. "Are you certain?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though I needed to hear the confirmation aloud. "Absolutely," Antonio said. "I saw it. She had a small vial and carefully poured it into your drink while keeping an eye around the room. I thought it was my duty to tell you, ma'am." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. I kept my composure, letting the outer calm mask the storm inside. I didn't speak for a few moments, taking in the sight of Celeste laughing lightly at a comment Marcus had made. The incongruity between her perfect smile and Antonio's warning twisted in my stomach. Thank you, I managed to say finally, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. Would you keep the glass? I need to check it. Antonio reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sealable plastic bag. Carefully, he poured my cranberry juice, residue and all, into it and handed it to me. The weight of it in my hand felt heavier than any glass I had ever held. He nodded, his expression grave. Be careful, Mrs. Hawthorne, and stay aware. Sometimes, the people we love most can hurt us the most. I watched him step away, blending back into the shadows of the restaurant, leaving me with the bag, the knowledge, and a cold, creeping fear that refused to dissipate. My eyes flicked toward Celeste and Marcus, their smiles still intact, still convincing, and I realized that the night I had anticipated as a celebration had already shifted. Every word, every glance, every laugh now carried a subtle, menacing weight. I gripped the bag a little tighter and exhaled slowly, forcing myself to remain outwardly calm. Nothing would be done impulsively. I would watch, wait, and confirm. But one truth had settled deep into my bones. The perfect evening I had imagined concealed a danger I had never expected from the people I trusted most in the world. I sat back in my chair, the sealable plastic bag containing my cranberry juice resting against my lap, nearly invisible beneath the tablecloth. Every instinct in me screamed, yet I kept my composure, smiling and nodding as Celeste discussed the upcoming charitable foundation I planned in honor of my late husband. Her words were meticulous, polished, and yet beneath them I sensed something rehearsed, almost mechanical. Marcus leaned closer at one point, his hand briefly touching hers as he offered a suggestion. It was casual, almost affectionate, but the subtle exchange set off alarms in my mind. I studied them without drawing attention, noting the flicker of hesitation in Celeste's eyes when our waiter passed, the slight twitch in Marcus's jaw as he glanced around the room. Every detail, however small, was a thread in a tapestry I was beginning to see with clarity. I sipped water from a glass I knew was untouched, letting it wash over my tongue while my mind calculated every scenario. The residue in my cranberry juice was a warning, a signal that tonight's celebration had already turned into a test of vigilance. I scanned the room with a calm exterior, noting the other diners, the lighting, the movement of the waitstaff, and the subtle way shadows shifted across Celeste's face as she laughed at one of Marcus's jokes. It was almost imperceptible, but my trained eye caught the tension under her smile. The waiter, Antonio, had moved away, blending into the dimly lit restaurant, yet the weight of his warning lingered like a tangible pulse. I reminded myself to observe, not react. Every gesture, every glance, every pause in conversation could be a clue. Marcus's hand hovered slightly too long near the sugar bowl. Celeste's fork rested midair for a heartbeat longer than necessary before returning to her plate. Small, deliberate movements that told a story if one had the patience to read them. I allowed myself to breathe slowly, focusing on the details without letting suspicion slip into panic. The foundation discussion continued, but I heard only fragments. My attention split between words and behaviors. This was a delicate dance, too obvious. And suspicion would be aroused, too cautious. And I risked missing crucial information. I reminded myself that my role tonight was observer, strategist, and protector. A sudden laugh from a neighboring table drew my attention momentarily, and I felt a brief pulse of normalcy. But when my eyes returned to Celeste and Marcus, their expressions seemed more calculated, more precise. The easy elegance of the evening had fractured into a game of intentions and hidden motives. I rested my hand lightly on the bag beneath the table, feeling its reassuring presence. The evening had shifted irrevocably. What had begun as a celebration was now a careful balancing act. Every sip, every word, every glance mattered. And in the quiet tension of the candlelight, I realized that vigilance alone could be my greatest weapon and perhaps my only chance of keeping the people I loved and myself safe. Once we left the restaurant, I excused myself under the pretense of needing some fresh air. Charleston's streets were quiet, the soft glow of gas lamps reflecting off the cobblestones, but I barely noticed. My mind was consumed by the weight of Antonio's warning, the residue I had seen at the bottom of my cranberry juice, and the flashes of tension in Celeste and Marcus's behavior. I had to confirm it. I had to know. I retrieved the small, sealable plastic bag from my purse, holding it tightly as if its contents contained the truth of my life itself. The cold weight of the glass within sent a shiver through me. I drove slowly through the quiet city streets, careful not to attract attention. Every red light felt like a pause in time, a moment to gather my thoughts. I rehearsed how I would explain the sample to the laboratory, keeping it simple yet urgent, without revealing the full truth of what I feared. The laboratory was discreet, tucked into a nondescript brick building a few blocks from the waterfront. I was greeted by a young technician with glasses and a clipboard. He looked at me with polite curiosity as I handed over the sealed bag. "I need a complete analysis," I said evenly, forcing calm into my voice. "Today, if possible. Full chemical breakdown." He nodded, accustomed to high-priority requests, and I watched him place the sample under a hood and start the preliminary tests. I sat in the small waiting area, my fingers drumming lightly against the armrest, my pulse quickening with each passing minute. Every thought circled back to the same question. Could someone I had loved for 38 years, someone I had raised, nurtured, and trusted, really attempt to end my life? Finally, the technician returned, a manila envelope in hand, his expression careful. "Ma'am, the results are conclusive," he said, handing it to me. I took it slowly, feeling the tremor in my hands. I opened the envelope and unfolded the report, scanning the technical language for the part I dreaded most. There it was, propranolol, a concentration 10 times the normal therapeutic dose, potent enough to trigger severe bradycardia and hypotension. A heart attack under normal circumstances could be fatal. And in someone with my pre-existing condition, hypertension, and a mild heart murmur, it would have been instantaneous. I sank into the chair, my breath caught somewhere between horror and disbelief. The room felt impossibly still, the hum of the air conditioning almost mocking in its serenity. I held the report closer, each word confirming a reality I wasn't prepared to confront. Celeste had tried to kill me, shaking. I forced myself to sit upright. My thoughts turned immediately to Marcus. Had he been complicit? Was this a joint decision? Or had Celeste acted alone? The idea that my daughter had weighed the cost of murder against money, against inheritance, against the life of her own mother, left a chill that crawled up my spine. And yet, beneath the shock, a current of resolve began to stir. I had survived decades of challenges, of impossible odds, of near failures. I could survive this too. Panic would serve nothing. Fear would paralyze me. But vigilance, careful planning, and a cool mind, those would keep me alive. I folded the envelope carefully and placed it inside my purse, feeling the weight not just of the paper, but of a decision that had already begun to take shape in my mind. I would not confront them recklessly. I would not let them know I had discovered the truth. Every step had to be deliberate. every observation precise. As I stepped out into the early evening air, Charleston's harbor stretched before me. The distant cries of seagulls echoing across the water, I took a slow, measured breath, feeling the cold edge of determination settle around me. This was no longer just a celebration gone wrong. This was survival, strategy, and justice waiting in the shadows. And I would meet it with every ounce of resolve I had spent a lifetime cultivating. I didn't sleep that night. Charleston's skyline glimmered beyond my bedroom window, the calm waters of the harbor contrasting sharply with the storm raging inside me. I kept the laboratory report close, reading the words again and again, letting the cold certainty sink in. Celeste had tried to end my life, and Marcus, he had been there, complicit or silent. I didn't yet know which. By morning, I called Sophia, my lawyer and confidant for decades. Her voice, calm and measured, was the anchor I needed as I recounted the events. Careful not to betray my panic. Evelyn, she said, after listening in silence, we need to understand why this happened. Not just that it did, but why. There are patterns in financial desperation, but what you're describing goes beyond mere necessity. We spent hours reviewing records, transactions, and hints Sophia had collected over the years. Slowly, a picture emerged. Celeste and Marcus were deeply in debt, yes, but not destitute in a way that excused their actions. Credit card overages, high-interest loans, luxury cars, and vacation properties that far exceeded their combined incomes painted a different story, one of indulgence, of living above their means, of cultivating a lifestyle they could not maintain. I felt bile rise as the full extent became clear. The attempt on my life hadn't been driven by survival, by genuine need, but by greed. My own daughter, raised with every value I had tried to instill, had chosen wealth and inheritance over life, over family. I remembered the sparkling champagne at the restaurant, her polished smile, the subtle glance at Marcus when she thought I wasn't looking. Every small gesture now resonated like a clue. Sophia spoke again, her voice firm. They had a chance to come to you, Evelyn. They could have asked for help. They didn't. Instead, they calculated, plotted, and acted in a way that could have ended your life without any consequences to themselves, at least in their eyes. I sank back into my chair, closing my eyes. Betrayal burned hotter than anger, sharper than fear. Years of devotion, of nurturing, of sacrifice, and this was the answer: greed. Nothing more. My hands trembled slightly as I thought of the countless nights I had stayed awake, balancing budgets, managing the hotels, ensuring they had everything they wanted, every sacrifice, every sleepless night. And this was how it was repaid. Yet even as the shock and disgust swirled through me, a strange clarity emerged. I could anticipate their moves, predict their desperation. Knowledge was power, and now I had it. I would need to act with precision, but at least the path was visible. The veneer of civility Celeste maintained would crumble under the weight of truth, and Marcus's composure would crack when confronted with evidence. I made a mental list of next steps: gather more documentation, confirm every transaction, and prepare for a controlled confrontation. No impulsive actions, no rash decisions. They had chosen greed over morality. I would respond with calculated justice, not emotion-driven retaliation. And as I sat in the quiet of my home, listening to the distant harbor sounds, I realized the depth of the lesson love alone could not protect someone from those who had abandoned it in pursuit of wealth. Betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined, and greed had stripped away the pretense of familial devotion. I clenched my fists lightly, feeling a cold determination settle in my chest. I would survive this, and they would answer for it. But it would be on my terms, measured and exacting, leaving nothing to chance. By mid-morning, I had arranged to meet Sophia in her office downtown. The drive along Charleston's cobblestone streets offered little comfort. Each familiar landmark felt heavy with memories of a life I had built, a life Celeste had almost ended. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, the sealed laboratory envelope resting against my lap. Its contents were both evidence and lifeline. Sophia's office was calm, austere, a sanctuary of rationality amidst the storm of my emotions. She rose as I entered, her warm smile belying the sharp intelligence that had guided me through decades of legal battles. "Evelyn," she said, gesturing to a chair opposite her polished oak desk. "I assume this is urgent." I nodded, setting the envelope down carefully. "It is. I need you to see this. And I need a plan precise, controlled, without letting them know I know." Sophia accepted the envelope with a nod, her fingers deliberate as she slid it open. I watched her eyes narrow as she scanned the laboratory results, the numbers confirming a dose of propranolol that would have been lethal for someone with my heart condition. She looked up at me, her expression measured. "This changes everything," she said softly. I exhaled slowly, feeling a cold steadiness settle over me. I don't want panic. I don't want confrontation. I want control. They need to know I'm aware, but not yet. And I need to understand their financial situation completely before any next steps. Sophia leaned back, steepling her fingers. "We can trace the transactions, verify debts, uncover any hidden assets. We can prepare an ultimatum that leaves no room for dispute, legally airtight, emotionally precise." I nodded, my mind already ticking through the possibilities. Every detail mattered: the timing of their visits, the locations they frequented, their patterns of behavior. Even the smallest oversight could allow them to regain advantage. "I want everything documented," I said firmly. "Credit cards, loans, luxury purchases. I need to see what drove them to this point." She made a few notes, then looked at me with the calm intensity that always grounded me. "And the confrontation. Do you want it public, private, immediate, controlled, private? I want them aware of the full evidence without panic, without rash decisions. They need to feel the weight of their choices, but under my terms, not theirs," I said, each word measured. Sophia smiled faintly. "It will take time, patience, and precision, but we can do this, and we'll do it quietly so no one else gets hurt in the process." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the desk. "I don't want revenge for revenge's sake. I want justice. I want them to understand that greed and betrayal have consequences, and that I am no longer vulnerable." Sophia nodded, pulling files from a cabinet and spreading them before us. The layout of debts, property ownership, and transactions began to form a clear portrait of Celeste and Marcus's overextended, reckless lives. Every indulgence, every reckless expense confirmed what I already suspected: this wasn't necessity. It was choice, and their choice nearly cost me everything. I allowed myself a small, cold smile, feeling the familiar surge of determination. I had spent a lifetime building a legacy, cultivating security, and guiding those I loved. And now, I would defend it with the same precision, the same relentless care, and the same clarity that had brought me here. Sophia looked at me, her gaze steady. "We'll move forward carefully, every step calculated, every action deliberate. You're in control, Evelyn." I nodded, feeling the weight of both responsibility and opportunity settle across my shoulders. For the first time since the restaurant, I felt not fear, but resolve. The game had begun, and I intended to win. The next morning, Charleston streets were bathed in a pale, soft light, the harbor reflecting the clouds above in gentle ripples. I sat in my home office, the sealed envelope with the lab results tucked carefully into a drawer. Sophia had prepared the files, organized every transaction, every loan, every indulgence of Celeste and Marcus. The evidence was undeniable, but tonight would be about control and precision. Not immediate confrontation. I dialed Celeste's number, keeping my voice calm, measured. Celeste, I'd like you and Marcus to come by the office this afternoon. We need to discuss some updates regarding the foundation. Her voice was bright, unsuspecting. Of course. Mom. We'll be there around 3 perfect, I said, letting the faintest edge of formality slip in. See you then. After I hung up, I took a deep breath and reviewed the plan with Sophia. One last time. Every detail mattered: how the files would be presented, the order of information, the timing of the reveals. Our objective was to confront them with undeniable truth while maintaining calm authority. Panic could tip the balance, but controlled awareness would leave them no room to maneuver. By mid-afternoon, the door opened, and Celeste stepped in first, her heels clicking softly against the polished hardwood floors. Marcus followed, his posture impeccable, his eyes polite but guarded. They both smiled, casual and confident, but I noted the subtle tension Celeste's fingers flexing slightly around her purse strap, Marcus's jaw tightening for just a fraction of a second. Thank you for coming, I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. Please, sit. Their smiles didn't falter as they did, but the air around the room shifted slightly. The polished veneer of civility was beginning to feel thin. Sophia stepped forward, opening a folder and spreading the evidence across the desk. Evelyn wanted to review some updates regarding the foundation. She said, voice calm but firm, including financial allocations and related planning. Celeste leaned forward, curiosity flickering across her face. Oh, wonderful. I've been excited to see what you're planning next. I nodded, letting a moment of silence hang before speaking. Before we begin, I want to ensure that we're all clear on the facts. I met their eyes directly, letting the weight of my presence settle in the room. The financial documents here are complete and accurate. Every transaction has been verified. Marcus shifted slightly in his chair, the first crack in his practiced composure. Celeste's smile remained, but her eyes darted briefly to him, searching for reassurance. I watched both of them, aware that they had no idea how much I already knew, how carefully this confrontation had been orchestrated. Sophia's fingers hovered over the folder as I continued, my voice even, controlled. We will review everything today: foundation plans, allocations, and some information that may require discussion. My words were calm but deliberate, each syllable carrying authority. Celeste and Marcus nodded, unaware of the trap that had already been set. Every glance they exchanged, every micro-expression was being recorded in my mind, catalogued for later understanding. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier, and I sat there, calm but alert, waiting for the precise moment when the weight of truth would begin to press upon them. I waited until Celeste and Marcus had settled into their chairs, the air around them thick with polite expectation. Sophia remained poised beside me, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the desk. I opened the folder containing the laboratory report and the compiled financial evidence, letting the pages fall open with a quiet, deliberate authority. Before we begin, I said, my voice even but firm, I need to show you something that cannot be ignored. I slid the laboratory results toward them, the numbers stark against the white paper. This is the analysis of the cranberry juice from the evening of our celebration. Celeste's hand hovered above the papers, curiosity in her eyes. Marcus leaned slightly forward, interest flickering across his carefully controlled face. I let the silence stretch, the tension building. Each heartbeat loud in my own chest. Propranolol, I continued. A dosage 10 times higher than normal therapeutic use, enough to induce severe bradycardia and hypotension. In someone with my cardiac history, it could have caused sudden death. Celeste's fingers froze, her expression polite but imperceptibly tight. Marcus's jaw flexed, his composed demeanor showing the first subtle fissure. I allowed them a moment to process, the words hanging like a tangible weight in the room. "Do you understand what this means?" I asked, meeting Celeste's eyes directly. "You attempted to end my life." Marcus shifted, trying to mask the shock, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. Celeste opened her mouth, a practiced defense forming, but I held up a hand. "Before you speak, consider the financial records." Sophia stepped forward, spreading the documents across the desk. Every luxury purchase, every overextended credit card, every loan taken to maintain an extravagant lifestyle lay bare. "These are accurate and verified," she said quietly. "Every transaction, every indulgence demonstrates that your actions were not motivated by necessity. They were choices made from greed." Celeste's eyes flicked to Marcus, searching for reassurance. He avoided my gaze, his composed exterior cracking further as he realized the scope of the evidence against them. I watched them both, cataloging every micro-expression, every subtle twitch, every pause in their practiced smiles. "I trusted you," I said slowly, letting the words carry the weight of decades of devotion and sacrifice. "I nurtured you. I provided for you. I raised you. And this is how it is repaid, not by mistake, not by misfortune, but by deliberate intent to take what is not yours, even at the cost of life." The room felt impossibly still. Celeste's breath caught, a shallow intake that revealed her sudden, visceral awareness. Marcus's hands flexed tightly in his lap, knuckles pale, as though clinging to composure with physical effort. Sophia's voice cut through, calm but commanding. "We have full documentation. Any attempt to deny these facts will be futile. The evidence is irrefutable laboratory results. Financial statements and first-hand observation all corroborate the same truth." Celeste swallowed hard, a tremor running through her perfectly controlled posture. "Mom," I raised a hand, silencing her. "Do not speak yet. Listen, understand the gravity of your choices. You gambled with my life, with the love I gave freely, and with the trust I built over 38 years. This is not about punishment for punishment's sake. This is about understanding the consequences of deliberate betrayal." Marcus shifted again, finally meeting my gaze, his eyes flickering with fear and calculation. The carefully constructed masks they had worn were beginning to crumble, replaced by a raw, unguarded recognition of what they had done. I leaned back slightly, allowing the weight of authority to settle fully into the room. Sophia stood by, silent but ready, as the truth I had long suspected transformed into undeniable evidence, pressing upon them with unrelenting clarity. In that moment, the veneer of civility evaporated. Celeste and Marcus sat motionless, their expressions flickering between disbelief, fear, and a dawning understanding. The evidence was complete, conclusive, and inescapable. And I realized that tonight, the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The evening that began as a celebration had become a reckoning. And I, Evelyn Hawthorne, was firmly in control. The room was silent, the weight of the evidence still settling around us like a dense fog. Celeste's hands trembled slightly as she shifted in her seat, Marcus's jaw tight and unyielding, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. I let the silence stretch, allowing them to fully absorb the gravity of what they had done. Every glance, every micro-expression, every quiver in their composure was catalogued in my mind. "I have two options for you," I said finally, my voice calm but resolute, carrying the authority of decades and the sharp edge of betrayal. I let the words hang in the air, the subtle tension tightening around the room. Sophia remained beside me, silent and watchful, her presence reinforcing the seriousness of what I was about to propose. The first option, I continued, was straightforward. We can involve the authorities immediately. With the laboratory report, the financial documentation, and Antonio's testimony, the case for attempted murder is irrefutable. The courts will see it clearly. You will face years in prison. Your choices, your actions, your greed all laid bare before the law. Celeste's eyes widened slightly, her carefully maintained composure faltering. Marcus shifted in his chair, a flicker of panic crossing his face, though he tried to mask it with controlled calm. They had counted on my silence, on my perceived trust. And now, the illusion had shattered. I allowed a beat of silence to deepen the tension before continuing. The second option is this: you confess, in writing, to your actions, acknowledging the attempt on my life and the deliberate misuse of your financial privileges. You will leave permanently this city, this country, and my life. There will be no contact, no attempts at reconciliation, no further claims. Your lives can continue elsewhere, but the consequences of your choices remain clear and documented. Sophia slid a blank document across the desk toward them, crisp and precise. Waiting. I observed Celeste, watching the flicker of disbelief and calculation in her eyes. "You understand what you're being asked," I said evenly. "This is not a request. It is an opportunity for you to take responsibility and avoid legal consequences, but only if you agree fully, without conditions." Marcus's hands flexed on the armrests of his chair, a subtle tremor betraying the calm facade. Celeste's gaze darted to him, then back to me, and I caught the first real signs of fear, the fleeting flash in her eyes that revealed understanding. They had underestimated the precision, the foresight, and the control I had maintained throughout. "You see," I continued, letting my tone convey the quiet authority I had cultivated, "I am not acting out of malice, but out of necessity. I will not allow the people I raised to destroy me, nor my legacy. The choice is yours, but know this: indecision or denial will default to option one. The law will act swiftly." A shiver passed through the room as the magnitude of their situation pressed down. The careful smiles, the politeness, the rehearsed gestures, all had become meaningless in the presence of truth. I watched them process, waiting, letting the silence amplify the weight of the ultimatum. Celeste's lips parted, perhaps to protest, perhaps to bargain, but I held my gaze, unwavering, and the room seemed to constrict around her and Marcus. Sophia's hand rested lightly on the stack of papers, a reminder that the legal weight behind me was unyielding. I leaned back slightly, letting the authority of decades of experience, trust, and betrayal radiate in the calmness of my posture. "Decide," I said softly, "now." The air in the office was heavy with tension as Celeste and Marcus finally reached a decision. I watched them carefully, every movement catalogued in my mind. Their eyes flicked to the documents on the desk, the blank confessions, the detailed record of debts, the evidence of their betrayal. The reality had sunk in, and there was no escaping it. Celeste's fingers trembled as she reached for the pen. She looked at Marcus briefly, searching for reassurance, but he only nodded, his jaw tight and pale. The practiced calm that had cloaked them for years was gone, replaced by the raw understanding that their choices had consequences they could no longer avoid. I leaned back in my chair, allowing the full weight of my authority to settle across the room. Sophia sat beside me, her presence a quiet reinforcement of the legal certainty that now enveloped them. I remained silent, letting the gravity of the moment speak for itself. Celeste picked up the pen first, her hand shaking slightly as she signed the confession. I saw the flash of fear and regret in her eyes, the subtle trembling that betrayed the internal reckoning she could not yet speak aloud. Marcus followed, his signature deliberate, a final acknowledgement of their actions and the consequences they would bear. When they had both signed, Sophia carefully collected the documents, securing them in a folder that would be stored safely and delivered to the authorities if any part of the agreement was broken. The finality of it settled over the room like a heavy curtain, closing the chapter on decades of deception and danger. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Celeste's gaze lingered on me, searching perhaps for forgiveness, for a flicker of maternal warmth, but all she found was calm resolve. Marcus's eyes avoided mine entirely, a mix of relief and despair hidden behind a carefully maintained composure. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in my chest ease. Relief mingled with a bittersweet ache, the knowledge that victory had been won, but at a cost that would linger. My daughter, the person I had nurtured and loved above all else, would leave my life entirely. This was justice, yes, but it was not without its own mourning. Sophia finally spoke, her voice steady. They understand the terms. They will leave the country, and the agreements will be enforced. I nodded, letting a small, controlled smile touch my lips. The danger was over. The threat removed. The control I had fought to regain was firmly in my hands. And yet, as I watched them gather their belongings and prepare to depart, a hollow ache settled in the place where trust and familial bond had once lived. Celeste paused at the doorway, her eyes meeting mine one final time. There was a flash of something unspoken regret, sorrow, perhaps even a recognition of the life they had squandered. But the moment passed. They stepped into the elevator, Marcus close behind, and the doors closed with a quiet, resolute finality. I remained seated, the office silent around me. A sense of empowerment settled deep within, tempered by the lingering sting of loss. The battle was won, the danger eliminated. And yet, the daughter I had loved, the child I had raised, was gone not in body, but in spirit. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the stillness of the office absorb the weight of the moment. The path ahead was mine to navigate. The legacy I had built safe and intact. The house was quiet now, unusually so, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in the aftermath of the storm. I sat in the study, the folder containing the confessions and all supporting documents secured in my desk. Everything was finalized, irreversible, and yet the silence was heavier than any confrontation I had ever faced. For hours, I simply sat, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. Relief mingled with an ache I couldn't quite shake, the loss of Celeste's presence in my life. The absence of someone I had raised and nurtured left a hollow echo in my chest. But beneath that, there was clarity, a certainty that the path forward was mine to define. I had survived, and now I could live not in fear, but in purpose. The Alberto Foundation awaited my attention, a promise I had made to my late husband and a legacy we had both envisioned. I opened the ledger and reviewed the plan's scholarships for young students, housing for children without families, programs to provide vocational training for those in need. Each line item was a tangible opportunity to transform lives, a reminder that even in the shadow of betrayal, something good could emerge. Sophia arrived in the late morning, her presence a comforting blend of professionalism and unwavering support. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently, as she set down a folder filled with updates from the foundation. I exhaled slowly, letting a small smile touch my lips. "Better," I admitted. It's strange relief, sorrow, and determination all at once. "But I'm ready to move forward," she nodded, understanding the unspoken weight of those words. Together, we reviewed the progress of the foundation. 6 months of planning, fundraising, and preparation had already laid a strong groundwork. But the real work, implementation, oversight, ensuring that every decision honored Alberto's memory, was where my energy would now be focused. I walked through the offices, noting the dedication of the staff. Teachers preparing lesson plans, counselors organizing community programs, volunteers arranging donations. Each action was a step toward building something meaningful. The chaos of the past weeks seemed distant here, replaced by purpose and tangible progress. I paused in front of a small office, looking at the framed photo of Alberto and me on our first trip to Charleston. I remembered the excitement in his eyes, the way he had believed in every dream we dared to pursue together. That same belief now grounded me, a reminder that while betrayal had taken much, it could not take the essence of what we had built. I set to work, reviewing proposals, prioritizing projects, and planning site visits for the new programs. Every decision, every allocation, every careful review was a reclamation of control, a deliberate act of creation born from destruction. Even as memories of Celeste's betrayal lingered, they became fuel for focus, sharpening my resolve to ensure that nothing, no greed, no deception would derail the Foundation's mission. By the late afternoon, I found myself seated on the balcony, Charleston's harbor stretching before me in the gentle glow of sunset. The water reflected the sky's colors, shifting from gold to amber, and I let the quiet wash over me. The ache of loss remained, but it was tempered now by clarity, by the knowledge that I was directing my energy towards something enduring, something larger than myself. And in that stillness, I understood the paradox personal tragedy could indeed be transformed into meaningful change. What had begun as a night of betrayal, fear, and near loss had become a catalyst, a reminder that purpose and resilience could rise from the ashes. I sipped tea from my cup, savoring the warmth and the momentary peace. The past could not be undone, but the future, my future, was mine to shape. The morning sunlight poured through the large windows of the Foundation's office, casting long, warm beams across the project plans spread neatly across the conference table. I stood there, reviewing the blueprints for the new orphanage, the scholarship programs, and the vocational training center we were about to launch. Each plan represented more than just infrastructure or funding. It was a tangible manifestation of hope, resilience, and purpose. Sophia was beside me, reviewing the spreadsheets and timetables with her usual meticulous precision. "We've scheduled the first site visit for next week," she said, tapping a highlighted section of the plan. "The contractors are ready, and the staff for the programs have been confirmed. Everything is on track." I nodded, feeling a surge of pride and relief. After months of turmoil, fear, and betrayal, this was the work that mattered. This was the work that would endure long after personal conflicts faded. I ran my hand over the documents, imagining the children who would benefit from this foundation, the young people who would gain skills and opportunities that might otherwise have been denied. The orphanage would house 50 children initially, but every detail had been designed with care: private sleeping quarters, a spacious library filled with books, a recreation area, and classrooms that would foster learning and creativity. I could picture them running through the hallways, their laughter echoing through the building, a sound more powerful than any words of thanks. Next, we reviewed the scholarship program. Hundreds of applications had already come in from students across the city, each one a story of ambition and potential. Sophia and I discussed how to evaluate applications fairly, ensuring that every recipient would not only benefit from financial support, but also from mentorship and guidance. I thought of my own daughter, Celeste, and the choices that had led us here, how much more fulfilling it was to nurture potential rather than chase selfish gain. The vocational center was perhaps the most exciting of all. It would provide young adults and older students with hands-on training in trades ranging from culinary arts to technology. The goal was to give them the tools to succeed independently, to equip them with skills that could change the trajectory of their lives. I could already imagine the pride in their eyes when they completed their first projects, the self-confidence that would ripple outward into their families and communities. As I walked through the plans, I allowed myself a rare moment to reflect. This foundation, this work, had become my anchor, a source of clarity and purpose. The betrayal I had endured, the loss of trust in my own daughter, had carved a hollow space in my heart. But in filling that space with meaningful work, I found something profoundly healing: the energy of the projects, the dedication of the staff, and the hope of the children became a balm, transforming pain into action. Sophia glanced at me, noting the emotion in my expression. "You've built something extraordinary," she said softly. "This will change lives, Evelyn, and it will leave a mark far greater than any of the turmoil you endured." I smiled, letting a quiet warmth fill me. "It's bigger than me," I admitted. "It's about building a future where potential isn't wasted, where hope is tangible and accessible. Every child, every student, every life we touch. This is my real legacy." By late afternoon, I stepped outside to oversee the grounds. Workers were marking foundations, volunteers were arranging materials, and a sense of anticipation hung in the air. I watched as small groups of children arrived for orientation, their wide eyes and eager smiles reminding me why every decision, every careful plan mattered. As I stood there, letting the wind carry the sounds of their laughter and chatter across the yard, I realized that helping others was healing me in ways I hadn't expected. The foundation was no longer just a tribute to my late husband. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of purposeful action, and to the possibility of joy and fulfillment, even after profound betrayal. The day had started like any other reviewing plans for the foundation, meeting with staff, and overseeing preparations for the new programs. But by mid-morning, a letter arrived that would change everything. The envelope was plain, yet the handwriting was careful and deliberate. I opened it slowly, unfolding the neatly written note. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I am Luisa Carvalho." It began, "I am a beneficiary of the Alberto Foundation and would like to meet you regarding my project on cardiac research. I was told you would understand the importance of my work." I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. Luisa, the name felt familiar, though I could not place it immediately. My thoughts raced another donor, a young researcher. Then the words settled in. "Another Carvalho," I murmured to myself, the connection forming slowly, like pieces of a puzzle sliding into place. Sophia arrived shortly afterward, her sharp eyes reading the letter over my shoulder. "This isn't just a routine visit," she said carefully. "The way this is written, she's been briefed on personal matters through the foundation. There's more here than research alone. The curiosity was irresistible. I arranged to meet Louisa at the Foundation's offices that afternoon. When she arrived, I was struck immediately by her presence, a young woman, perhaps 25, poised yet warm, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room. Her hair was dark, pulled into a neat ponytail, and her expression carried a blend of excitement and respect. "Mrs. Hawthorne," she said softly, extending her hand. "It is truly an honor to meet you." I took her hand, feeling a surprising wave of emotion. "The honor is mine," I said carefully, hiding the sudden rush of curiosity and hope. "Tell me about your project." She spoke eloquently, her words flowing naturally as she described her research on cardiac regeneration, a field that had become personal after the loss of my late husband, whose own heart condition had inspired the Foundation's work. But beneath the technical details, I sensed an underlying reason for her approach, a depth of connection I could not yet articulate. After a while, the conversation turned personal. "I know this may be unexpected," she said hesitantly, "but I believe you are my grandmother, my mother. Celeste never spoke of me, but I was told the truth through my adoptive parents and the Foundation's guidance. I felt my breath catch. My granddaughter, a child I had never met, yet whose existence had been shadowed by betrayal and secrecy. I searched her eyes for any hint of deceit, but found only honesty and hope. "Louisa," I began, my voice trembling, despite my best efforts to remain composed. "You're my granddaughter?" She nodded, tears glistening but restrained. "Yes, and I've wanted to meet you for years. The Foundation's work brought me closer, and I couldn't miss the opportunity to learn from you." I reached out instinctively, pulling her into a gentle embrace. The warmth of her presence filled a space in me that had felt hollow since Celeste's departure. For the first time in months, I felt a bridge to family, to connection, to something real and enduring. Sophia watched quietly, understanding the gravity of the moment. I held Louisa a little longer, savoring the closeness, the recognition, and the chance to start anew. The betrayal that had haunted me was still part of my past, but here was hope, unexpected and transformative, stretching out before me. When we finally pulled back, I studied her face, noting the similarities to Celeste's eyes, expression, and the spark of determination, but also the difference, a grounded, compassionate warmth that I had longed to nurture. For the first time, I realized that family could be reclaimed, even after years of secrecy and deceit. And in that realization, I found a renewed sense of purpose not just in the Foundation, but in the possibility of love, connection, and a future I had thought lost. The following morning, sunlight spilled across the Foundation's main office, illuminating the blueprints and folders that now seemed less like work and more like bridges to the future. Louisa arrived early, her dark eyes bright with curiosity and purpose. I welcomed her with a warm smile, the weight of yesterday's revelations settling into a quiet, hopeful rhythm. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," she said softly, extending her hand again, though this time it felt more like a gesture of familiarity than formality. I brought my notes on the research progress and some ideas for the new community projects. I gestured toward a table where the materials were laid out, feeling a surge of pride and warmth. "Louisa, call me Evelyn," I said. "Let's review these together. I want you to see how much your work can impact the Foundation's mission." We spent the morning discussing her project on cardiac regeneration, but our conversation quickly expanded to include broader plans for scholarships, the orphanage, and vocational training programs. I guided her through the intricacies of managing a foundation, budgeting, coordination, community engagement, while she offered fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, and a youthful enthusiasm that reminded me of my own energy decades ago. As we worked, I observed her closely, noting the resemblance to Celeste, but also the distinct differences: Louisa's steadiness, her compassion, and the genuine desire to make a positive impact. She was motivated not by entitlement, but by purpose. And in that, I found an unexpected joy. Here was family restored, not through obligation, but through connection, shared values, and mutual respect. By afternoon, we walked together through the newly constructed sections of the orphanage. Children greeted us with smiles, laughter ringing through the air. Louisa knelt to speak with a small boy about his art project, her patience and encouragement evident in every word. I watched, my heart swelling with pride, realizing that this moment was more than just mentorship. It was a reclamation of family, a reconstruction of trust and love that had been fractured years ago. Later, we sat on the balcony overlooking the harbor, the sun dipping toward the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of gold and amber. Louisa spoke of her hopes and fears, of the gaps in her own life she longed to bridge, and I listened, offering guidance, reassurance, and a steady presence. Each word, each shared story, built a new foundation, one not of bricks or ledgers, but of trust and understanding. I never thought I'd feel this connected, she admitted quietly. After everything, I was afraid family would only mean disappointment. I reached out, resting my hand gently on hers. Family can be many things, I said softly. It can be found, rebuilt, and nurtured, and it can grow stronger when it is chosen, rather than assumed. We sat together as the evening shadows lengthened, planning, dreaming, and sharing stories of past triumphs and lessons learned. With every discussion, every laugh, every thoughtful pause, I felt the invisible scars of betrayal soften. The foundation had given me purpose. Louisa's presence gave me a renewed sense of family. By nightfall, I realized that the past, with all its pain, could coexist with hope and joy. The wounds of betrayal would not vanish entirely, but in rebuilding connections through mentorship, shared values, and genuine care, I had discovered a way to transform loss into growth, isolation into partnership, and fear into trust. And in that realization, I understood that even after the deepest betrayal, the heart could heal and new bonds could flourish. The day of the grand opening arrived with a crisp morning breeze that carried the scent of salt from Charleston Harbor. Balloons fluttered along the walkways. Colorful banners announced the Alberto Foundation, and a sense of anticipation filled every corner of the orphanage and vocational center. Children's laughter and chatter echoed through the hallways, a testament to the life and energy that had been infused into every project. I stood at the entrance, dressed simply but elegantly, and watched as families, volunteers, and supporters arrived. Sophia was at my side, as she had been through every step of planning, her steady presence a quiet reassurance that the foundation was ready to thrive. "Evelyn," she said softly, "everyone is here. They're excited to see what you've built." I smiled, feeling the warmth of pride settle deep in my chest. The foundation was more than a project. It was a testament to resilience, to the lessons learned from betrayal, and to the enduring strength of purpose. Every detail, from the carefully designed classrooms to the play areas and study spaces, represented a commitment to transforming lives, including my own. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, children from the orphanage stood alongside the staff, their eyes wide with curiosity and excitement. Louisa joined me, her youthful energy and focused dedication a reflection of the promise we had nurtured together. She squeezed my hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of the journey we had shared, one that had begun with secrecy, loss, and uncertainty, and had grown into collaboration and hope. When the scissors met the ribbon, applause erupted, blending with the joyful shouts of children exploring their new spaces. I took a moment to absorb the scene, letting the laughter, the cheers, and the shared enthusiasm wash over me. This was a life reclaimed, a legacy transformed, a vision realized despite the shadows of past betrayal. Later, I walked through the classrooms, speaking with teachers and volunteers, observing children engaged in reading, drawing, and interactive lessons. Every interaction reminded me why I had fought so hard to regain control of my life and my resources. Betrayal had threatened to shatter everything, but in its wake, I had discovered clarity, focus, and the capacity to create something enduring and meaningful. Louisa guided me to the vocational center, explaining the training programs, the schedules, and the mentorship initiatives. Watching her in action, I saw not just the reflection of my family, but the embodiment of values I had hoped to pass on: resilience, compassion, and a dedication to purpose beyond self-interest. As the afternoon sun began to fade, casting long, golden shadows across the grounds, I found a quiet spot on the balcony overlooking the harbor. The water shimmered, mirroring the sky's soft hues, and for the first time in months, I felt a profound sense of peace. The darkness of betrayal, the fear, and the grief had been transformed into energy, vision, and connection. I breathed deeply, letting the moment settle within me. The foundation was open. Lives would be changed. Hope was tangible. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to embrace the fullness of this new beginning, knowing that even the deepest wounds could be the catalyst for purpose, meaning, and renewal.